Все пошло.
Ну что, мы начинаем? Начинаем. All right. Hello, everyone. And today is our fourth lecture and our second lecture in the block of lexical stylistic devices. So today we're going to finish looking at stylistic devices which are connected tightly with metaphor and metonymy, which were the subject of our last time's lecture. And then we're going to look at figures of based on contradiction or opposition and on figures of quantity. So irony, oxymoron, paradox, then hyperbole, meiosis, and litotis. And finally, time permitting, we'll look at different types of wordplay. And first and foremost, pun and zeugma. I'm sure that many of these things you remember from school. And you remember what they are. But today we're going to look at them, I hope, on a different level. We'll look at the functions, we'll look at where they're used, we'll look at some modern examples, and also think about the broader impact of these stylistic devices, about their broader role, not only within literature and linguistics, but also within art in general. Just to remind you that stylistics looks at the language as an art object, as a piece of art. And we start today with periphrasis. You might be surprised that we regard periphrasis now because structurally it is a syntactical stylistic device. But we will look at periphrasis now because it is often a structural bearer of metonymy or metaphor. So although the essence of periphrasis is syntactical, but it is very widely used for expressing metaphor or metonymy, for constructing metaphor and metonymy. And the term itself, periphrasis, comes from a Greek word with a prefix, periphrasis. Peri means around, about, around, and phrasis means phrase. So it's a roundabout phrase, or using another Latin term, it is circumlocution. So saying something in a roundabout way. If we give a name to it, it's naming something by other words than the usual direct name. So calling something a different name than the usual direct name. And here the metaphor, again, even in science, in research, we speak with metaphoric terms. Instead of direct name, that's a direct line, we say something in a roundabout way, right? This is also a metaphor. And there are two options how to name something not indirectly. One of them is the use of synonyms. And the other one is the use of a longer phrase in place of a possible shorter form of expression. And it is usually the second meaning, which is understood by periphrasis, although some books and some authors regard the use of synonyms also as a way of periphrasis because it is an indirect name. But again, usually it is structurally a longer phrase in place of a possible shorter form of expression. For example, instead of one word, we use two words. Instead of two words, we use 3 or 4 or more words. Now, let's look at the examples. The primary use of periphrasis is in definitions. A definition is by definition, a periphrasis, right? When you give a definition to one word and you explain it in the form of a sentence. It may be logical, but it's the dividing line between what is logical and what is stylistic is very fine indeed. And this is an example. These are two definitions, two one notion. One of them is a serious definition from the Oxford Dictionary, and the other one is a funny definition from Samuel Johnson's dictionary. Grain grown as food for animals and for making flour, porridge, etc. And the definition to the same notion, you will have to guess what it is a grain which in England is generally given to horses, but in Scotland supports the people. You see here this irony and a jab at the Scottish, right? Well, this stereotype, right? So what is the word? Oats, right you are. This is oats. So this is the essence of periphrasis. One name, direct name, and a roundabout way of saying this. So the first use of periphrasis is in dictionaries. And then, of course, definitions in literature and so on. But if we look at some more ancient types of periphrasis, an interesting example is Old English kennings. You remember, probably from your history of English, that kennings were figurative descriptions of something, and they were riddles at the same time. So you had to guess what it is. Let's guess some of the kennings. A whale road. The sea is the road for whales. A wave steed, steed жеребец. A ship, right you are. A fish home. The sea, right. Ring giver. The king, the lord, somebody who had rings to give and gave them. That's why we have the Lord of the Rings, right? As an allusion to Old English kennings. Well, I don't have it here, but what is a bone house? A body, right, body, good. Battle friend? No. Sword, the sword. It's not as explicit as that. He's not a man, right? He's a sword. Battle sweat? Blood, right. So you guess it, right? You guess it because there is, well there are simple metaphors and metonymies which are coded in a roundabout way. Now, periphrasis is everywhere. It is as it has been with writers as early as the Bible and books of antiquity. Then it was beloved in the 17th and 18th centuries in the aureate or very ornate style of writing. But it's everywhere. And some of the periphrases are already there in the system of the language. The trite is the banal linguistic periphrases, like our winged friends are birds. Right, then some of them are not. Then, if we go down up this road from the trite, from the dead periphrasis to the more genuine ones, to the more interesting ones, we see that they pass the stage of being explained by the authors. For example, the grave of France, the deadly Waterloo. The grave of France is a periphrasis for Waterloo, where what happened? Napoleon was defeated, right? Yeah, thank you. Napoleon was defeated, and this is the grave of France. Soon the sons. Now, the next stage is when you have to guess what periphrasis means, and like with kennings, soon the sun's warmth makes them, the birch trees, shed crystal shells, such heaps of broken glass to sweep away. This is the poem Birches by Robert Frost, where he compares ice, which is left on the trees after a rain and a frost, a nightly frost, to glass, and he calls them crystal shells, and then heaps of broken glass when the morning sun warms them and they all fall down. A beautiful image. Yeah, well, nowadays, well, periphrasis may be not so poetic as this one. For example, in a modern series, an infant dinosaur calls his father not the mama, right? Which is the father, right? It's just in a roundabout way. Now, periphrasis may come in the form of a word, and this is the more unusual type. This is the synonym, right? The first type of periphrasis that we mentioned. And it is very old indeed in the history of literature. For example, this one comes from the Bible. I have sinned against heaven. Я согрешил на небо. Who is meant by heaven? Yeah, God. God is meant by heaven. And this is a roundabout way of referring to God, right? Through this association. But usually periphrasis comes in the form of a phrase or a collocation. For example, here are some classical ones. Let's guess some of them. The Finni tribe. Which creature has fins? Плавники. Fish. So the Finni tribe, плавникастое племя. The fish, right. My better half. It's a trite periphrasis for, yeah, my wife, right. The Swan of Avon. Aha, let's check your lingua-cultural knowledge. The River Avon is tightly associated with Stratford on Avon. And who is the Swan of Avon? Shakespeare, William Shakespeare, of course. If you Google for the Swan of Avon, you will find lots of materials revert to Shakespeare. Venice of the North. St. Petersburg, because it's built on canals. Athens of the North. You probably don't know. That's a periphery. You know? Edinburgh, right? You are. Good that you know this. Right. I'm not sure why. Maybe because of the universities and the general atmosphere of knowledge and research. Well, Athens of the North. Yeah, these collocations and phrases may be rather difficult. They may be not stereotype, not tried, not dead periphrasis. For example, here, my dear Tina, we have paid our homage to Neptune. He will forgive us if we now turn our backs on him. That's a phrase from The French Lieutenant's Woman by Fowles, where a man and his wife stand where? Can you guess? This is a very banal situation, but it is described in a very poetic way. Neptune is associated with water, with the sea, the god of the sea, of ocean in Greek mythology. So what does he suggest they do? We have paid our homage, he says. Отдали дань Нептуну. Он не обидится, если мы повернемся к нему спиной. They stood where? On the seashore. And they were looking at the sea, admiring the sea view. And then he says, well, it's probably time to go. We have looked at the sea long enough. Let's go back. Right? So pay their homage to Neptune is they've looked enough at the sea. Let's go back. And of course, you need a lot of background knowledge to understand this sort of periphrasis, but it's everywhere. The thing is that the more you learn the language, the more of such things you get into. And the more you understand, the better your command of the language. And of course, if you read authentic texts, especially fiction or something like jokes, you have to sort of encounter this. Some more examples of the more usual periphrasis. I don't think I think they knew that he liked to nip at the bottle, right? Посасывать бутылочку, прикладываться к бутылочку, to drink alcohol. He had instruments of destruction. You have to guess that these are guns. So long as men can breathe or eyes can see, you don't have to guess. But you could say it's shorter, so long as men can live, right? And instead of this, we have this longer poetic, more detailed expression. Who has been so prematurely deprived of what can never be replaced. And what can never be replaced stands for mother here. So somebody who had their mother die early. The passion to shake hands with the great ones of the earth, с великими мира сего. So kings, presidents, pop stars. So what does periphrasis do? It usually, instead of going the short way, the direct way, it takes you in a roundabout way, but at the same time, it brings in many associations, right? It makes your picture of what you are speaking about more complex, right? Sometimes it pulls out of the general picture of this object one particular feature and sort of zooms in, right, and magnifies this particular feature. So what the person is shown to us through one or two particular features which stand for him. So of course this helps characterization. This is something you had in your course of lexicology, but I decided to add at least one slide here to remind you of this phenomenon and for you to remember, and because this is only logical to speak of it here, that periphrasis is at the heart of euphemisms, phrases which substitute a taboo word with a longer, usually longer, or a synonymous, socially accepted phrase. When saying something too directly is for various reasons undesirable. And usually, just to remind you that euphemisms are usually either religious in character or social in character, when certain things which are considered to be unmentionable, unspoken about, unspeakable, they are referred to in a roundabout way. Well, horses sweat, men perspire, but women only glow. Glow, perspire, and sweat is the same thing, right? But glow sounds much better, лоснятся, блестят, than sweat, потеют. And perspire is better than sweat too. Then euphemisms are everywhere. They're ubiquitous in newspapers, especially in political speech. And these are old examples. Unfortunately, I haven't collected enough examples for this slide. But still, he lied, or lie, a reckless disregard for truth, безрассудное невнимание к правде. He lied, he misinformed us. Revolt may be substituted by the word tension, for example, tension in Kashmir, right? Трение, напряженность в Кашмире. Starvation, undernourishment. They think we have come by this horse in some dishonest manner. So, мы приобрели эту лошадь нечестным путем, which is a periphrasis euphemism for stolen. Yes. Perspire is something like покрываются испариной. Right. Yeah. So what are euphemisms used for? They're used to cloud the truth, right? And it may be for various purposes, maybe for political purposes, for social, for moral purposes. And it is usually when we want to make the truth more acceptable, right? Better swallowed, or when we actually want to deceive someone. So this is an instrument of deception when we avoid mentioning some bad thing and speak of it as a neutral thing, something which is not as bad, right? So periphrasis in this case is a method of deception. Any questions about periphrasis? Yes, please. Look, they are like parallel or things which come in different dimensions. Metaphor is a hidden comparison, and periphrasis is a structural way of describing something. It may be metaphorical. So there may be metaphor inside this periphrasis. The periphrasis is a bearer for a metaphor, right? It helps to create the metaphor syntactically by using more words. But it can be a metonymic periphrasis as well, right? Well, we had some of them here, so long as men can breathe or eyes can see. So life is dependent on breathing and seeing, right? Or rather, they are sort of contiguous in time and space, right? So this is a metonymic periphrasis. Yeah. Yeah, good. Thanks for the question. I think it helped to clarify this thing, right? Yes, please. Euphemism is a type of periphrasis, yes. By its very name, meaning that you say better of something, better speaking, better saying of something than it is usually done, and in a roundabout way. Good. More questions? No. Let's go on then. Epithet. Epithet is also a stylistic device, which is, I would say, syntactical in character, but it is a bearer for metonymy or metaphor, a structural bearer of metonymy or metaphor. This is your old acquaintance from school. You remember that an epithet is an expressive or figurative description, an expressive attribute of something. An expressive attribute of something. It comes from a Greek word epitheton. Again, it contains a prefix, epi, which means on, and thetos, put. So on put, literally, but meaning added, something added on. And epithet falls into two groups. Epithets fall into two groups. The associated epithets and the unassociated epithets. This is the first classification by the type of their connection with what they describe. An associated epithet is something which is a description which takes some feature which is inherent to what is described, something which is typical of it, something which people usually associate with it. For example, green woods. The green color is typical of woods. This is as an associated epithet. Very often such epithets become fixed epithets, so they function as the usual epithet of such words, like green woods, blue sea, sweet smile, fair England. Well, it is beautiful, but it's just one of those attributes of England. It was chosen as it is often used. Saltiers, can they be not salty? Probably not. So, by the way, this is a tautological epithet, right? Something which literally describes what it usually is. But it's an associated fixed epithet. And soft pillow. Usually pillows are soft, right? So these epithets are associated with what they describe. Unassociated epithets add a feature that is not inherent, присущий, something which is not inherent, and something which is usually in the viewer's eye, something which is there in their imagination. It doesn't mean that it's not a property of this object, but it means that not everyone feels it, right? It is very individual, subjective, and it arises out of this co-working of the object and the observer. Voiceless sands, беззвучные пески, безголосые даже пески. Right? This is a metaphoric epithet, right? This is a something which creates this metaphor. April twilight. Twilight can be any, right? And April twilight adds a specific atmosphere to it, right? Well, can you imagine yourself in April twilight, spring twilight? There's a special atmosphere to it, right? I hope you feel it. A star-eyed Egyptian, звездоглазые египтяне. And yeah, well, this star-eyed. Seeking the bubble reputation, even in the cannon's mouth. Bubble reputation, раздутая, Zyriste reputatia, right? And this is also a metaphor. So epithet, like periphrasis, is a means to create metaphor and metonymy very often, right? It's a structural bearer of metonymy or metaphor. Now, structurally, the epithets can be also subdivided into several groups, depending on how many words or parts of the word it contains. There may be simple epithets, for example, yellow wood. And would you agree that yellow wood is a more genuine epithet than green woods, right? Yellow woods tell us of autumn, right? And this is an epithet from Robert Frost. Crumbling silence, крашащаяся тишина. Very unusual. Compound epithets, the wine dark sea. And this is an ancient epithet from Homer. Apple-faced woman, and we see the picture, right? Phrase epithets. He made an excuse me face when a whole phrase is taken as an epithet. A can-do approach. Well, I associate it with Barack Obama, who often spoke of can-do approach, right? Can-do attitude. That I can do it. Then phrase epithet, which may come in the post position. For example, this phrase from Longfellow, ships that pass in the night and signal each other in passing. Sentence. Well, this I like this one. It comes from Three Men in a Boat. Montmorency is a dog who is that is a cunning dog and a roguish one, can steal things. But there is a sort of, oh, what a wicked world this is, and how I wish I could do something to make it better and nobler expression about Montmorency that has been known to bring the tears into the eyes of pious old ladies and gentlemen who feel that they want to give it some meat or sausage. But of course, this is deceptive appearance. So simple, compound, phrase, sentence. That's easy to remember if you remember the levels of the language. Now, there is a special type of an epithet which is called the reversed epithet. Reversed epithet. I'm sure that you have encountered it in your grammar classes, but it is a rather strange epithet, I should say. At least I felt it. I felt that it was strange when I was a student. I still feel it is very unusual. A hook of a nose means a hooked nose. Nose крючком. Her brute of a brother, meaning her brutal brother. But it is reversed because we use this off phrase. So it looks like the brute is the principal word in the collocation, but it's not, essentially. A faded white rabbit of a woman. So a woman who looked like this. Then epithets are more effective, or very often they are used like this, when they come in strings, in series, volleys of epithets. For example, and the eyes, watchful, waiting, perceiving, indifferent, right? Every new epithet adds a new view at this object, a new perspective. This is from Agatha Christie. Mm-hmm. Well, as you remember, epithets, they do not contradict metaphor or metonymy. Epithets can be metaphoric, metonymic, we'll see. So they are carriers, nicetily. They're structural bearers of metaphor and metonymy. So their essence is syntactical. But what they do usually refers to lexis, to vocabulary, to semantics. So here is an example. So epithets may be different figuratively. They may be carriers of metonymy. A disapproving finger, right? It's not the finger which is disapproving, it's the person who is disapproving, the attitude. Restless pillow. Do you remember ruffled mind makes a restless pillow? It's not the pillow which is restless, it's the person who is restless who cannot sleep. Merry hours. It's not the hours themselves who are merry. It's people who experience who are merry during this time, right? Merriment. Cloudy darkness. It's darkness during the night, and at the same time there are clouds in the sky, right? So it describes something which is typical of darkness, or not typical, but which is which belongs to darkness in this particular case. A bee loud glade, glade rosha. A bee loud glade is a glade in which bees buzz, right? Hum. So they are there. It's metonymic. Metaphoric, chorusing birds, birds who sing as if they were a chorus of people. Поющие хором птицы. Green rhymes. I'm at a loss about what the poet really meant. You can think for yourselves what green rhymes are, зеленые рифмы. Masterpiece trees, I think that's a nice phrase. Шедевральные деревья, деревья шедевры, right? You can visualize them. Trees are like masterpieces in art, in music, in painting. Velvety black voice, voice which is like velvet, so probably it's soft, it's nice. And black, I don't know what you associate with black voice. Black velvety voice. Well, some sort of, yeah, dark, low voice, bass, right? So this is in this case, epithets are the carriers of metaphor. They can also be carriers of hyperbole, to which we are going to pass on soon. A truck tire sized donut, right? He had a truck tire sized donut, which is probably unbelievably big, very big. Not as big as the truck tire, but still quite big. Ironic. This is an example from a novel where the speaker says something very incoherently, very nonsensically. And then the author writes, this coherent speech was interrupted by. He's ironic, of course. He doesn't mean it is coherent. He means it is wild. Is it clear? So epithet is a structural syntactical carrier for other lexical stylistic devices. Same as periphrasis. Same as periphrasis. And there are cases, you can find on the internet cases when some periphrases are called epithets and vice versa. Now we're going, so any questions about metaphor, metonymy, antonomasia, periphrasis, and epithet? So antonomasia, periphrasis, and epithet are structural carriers for metaphor and metonymy. Yes? No, they are stylistic devices. They are stylistic devices. They are not, well, some of them do belong to the expressive means, like Greenwoods, right? These are fixed things. So everything which is trite, everything which is dead, like dead metaphors, dead metonymies, dead periphrasis, trite epithets, they already belong to the language and they are expressive means. Something that you create and use, something genuine, they are stylistic devices. Thanks for the question, by the way. That's a good addition, that good clarification. Yes. Good. More questions? No. So we are done with the figures of quality, right? Metaphor and metonymy, they're usually called figures of quality. There will be one more, but I classify them slightly differently. So now we're going to speak of figures which are based on opposition and contradiction. The tropes, stylistic devices which are based on opposition and contradiction. Not all, but the ones which are mostly lexical. I'm going to leave aside antithesis, which I'm going to lecture about in the lecture about syntactical stylistic devices. There will be three stylistic devices here: irony, oxymoron, and paradox. So irony. Again, you are intuitively familiar with this. This is direct opposition or discrepancy, несоответствие, нестыковка, between the meaning and the sense, между значением и смыслом. Meaning is like the dictionary meaning, and sense is the contextual meaning. So what is meant usually, and what you mean in this at this particular moment. So there must be an opposition, like plus and minus. You say yes, but you mean no. For example, you say, ну да, конечно. So if you take the literal meaning of the word ну да, конечно, that means that you agree. But in fact, you disagree, right? So that's the opposite, no. Or ну да, ну молодец. So you say, good thing, молодец, a good boy, but essentially you mean that that's a bad job, right? Or for example, this example, it must be delightful to find oneself in a foreign country without a penny in one's pocket. And of course, you don't mean delightful, you mean dreadful. So you actually mean the opposite, the antonym or the opposite of this, what you say. Why do we use irony? Why do we use irony? How do you feel about it? What do you? To show emotions, right? To show our irritation, usually. Our irritation or criticism. And this is what the second use of irony, the second meaning, definition of irony reveals. This is incongruity. What is incongruity? Can you look it up quickly? What is incongruity? Well, it's similar to discrepancy, right? Discrepancy, incongruity. Нелепость, нестыковка, often revealing human weakness or folly. Folly, глупость. So there must be some нелепость, something which doesn't come together, right? Something, some opposition again, contradiction between what is said and what you mean. And it is used to reveal human weaknesses. So it is criticism again. So irritation and criticism. This is the use of irony. It can be used anywhere, in fiction, in newspapers, in headlines, in, I don't know, in ordinary speech, right? Very often. Here are some literary examples. An election is coming. Universal peace is declared. And the foxes have a sincere interest in prolonging the lives of the poultry. Грядут выборы, объявлен всеобщий мир, и фоксы лисы выражают искренний интерес в улучшении жизненных условий домашней птицы. Переведем это так, да? Продлении жизни домашней птицы. And of course, you can recognize irony here. And of course, this is allegory, right? Metaphor at the same time. This may be a good comment that irony doesn't contradict metaphor. You can have irony and metaphor at the same time, like here, right? In this case, by foxes, well, politicians are meant, but we still have irony. I'll help, she says. That means she'll point with her spade and maintain an endless line of chatter. Я помогу, говорит она. Это значит, что она будет стоять, указывать, где копать лопатой, и бесконечно болтать. So does she help? No, that's the opposite, right? But she says, I'll help. And through this, which quality is revealed? Which human weakness is revealed? Well, talkativeness, the extra talkativeness and laziness, right? Sloth. The earth was made for Dombey and Son to trade in. Rivers and seas were formed to float their ships. Of course, we understand that rivers and the earth were not created for Dombey and Son, but that's how they perceived the situation, right? They acted as if it was like this. Which human folly and weakness is revealed here? Pride and extreme egoism, extreme selfishness, right? Egoticism. I like a parliamentary debate, particularly when it's not too late. from Byron. So which weakness is revealed here? Say it louder. That it's always late. No. It's about, imagine that you are a member of parliament. I like a parliamentary debate, particularly when it's not too late. Does he really like parliamentary debate? Well, probably not, because then you would enjoy it in all cases. But so that shows that the person is a bit what's the word? Hypocritical, thank you. The person is hypocritical and lazy, right? Hypocritical and lazy. Well, irony can exist not only on the level of a single sentence or a single paragraph. Irony can also exist within the plot of the whole story, right? So within the plot of the whole story, there may be irony. You remember the Gift of the Magi? Have you read it? By O. Henry. Do you remember the story when there was a married couple, young, poor students or just young, poor young people, and they decided to make each other presents for Christmas. And she decided to cut off her magnificent hair, to sell it, and to buy a leather strap for the watch that her husband had, because he had a watch without a strap. And he, at the same time, sold his watch, his precious watch, to buy a comb for her magnificent hair. And finally, they find themselves without the hair, but with a comb, without the watch, but with a leather strap. So this is irony, right? The opposite of what they meant to do. But at the same time, there is a higher truth in this, that they sacrificed their most precious thing. And even though it turned out to be a stupid situation, but at the same time, what is precious is their love for each other and their sacrifice, right? And that's why it is called the gifts of the Magi. They're compared with the gifts that the Magi, the wise men, brought to Jesus Christ, the most precious things. Irony can also arise out of extra linguistic context. So irony generally is revealed through context, like many other stylistic devices. So the context may not only be linguistic, like in the previous cases, it may also be extra linguistic. And when the words contradict the extra linguistic context, irony may arise. This is a funny photo saying fancy eating outside when it's winter. So the irony is that, of course, you would fancy eating when it's warm, when it's Indian summer out there. But of course, in winter, you wouldn't, right? So this phrase looks out of place. It contradicts the context. Or, for example, this one. Hikers and bikers move to the side of the road when a vehicle approaches. And the irony arises out of the, the dry and usual direction of what you have to do on the sign, and the hypothetical situation if you follow it in this particular context, right? Well, these two photos come from, I think it was the Guardian collection of strange signs seen around the world, sent in by their readers. Yeah, so the context and the phrase, they contradict each other, and this is irony. Any questions about irony? No. Then we move on. Our next stylistic device, which is built on contradiction and opposition, is oxymoron. Oxymoron. It comes from the Greek word, again, it's your old favorite. Oxymoron means sharp, oxys, sharp, and blunt, moron. So sharp, blunt. It's contradiction or contrast between descriptions of the same thing or between the attribute and the name. I have to remind you or to tell you that oxymoron exists on the level of a collocation, of a phrase. The same thing, if you realize it in a sentence, will be a paradox. So a contradiction between this, or contrast between the descriptions, between two or more descriptions of the same thing, or between the attribute and the name. And here are oxymorons. Some of them are familiar to you, some of them are not. Some of them are trite, banal, dead. Some of them are fresh, genuine, and interesting. Or some of them we don't even notice that we say them. We only realize it when we reflect on it, when we look back on what we've said. Awfully beautiful, terribly nice. The worst friend, the best enemy. Some of them are recognizable, immediately recognizable. A gentlemanly tyrant. And a pleasantly ugly face. Can you imagine a pleasantly ugly face? Yes. Yes, we can. We'll mention why. A silent thunder. This one is difficult to imagine. Well, actually, oxymoron is a manifestation, is a showing up of a very deep phenomenon when two contradictions come together. And very often we come across such situations. This is paradox. This is oxymoron. These are just structural varieties. But it's the case which, well, partly described in Hegel's philosophy, if you remember, right? When there is a thesis, there is a contra-thesis, and then there is the synthesis of these two things, right? Or there is a phrase that the opposites often meet, right? In Russian, we have the same as «От любви до ненависти один шаг». So these are all things which show us the complexity of things around us. Sometimes they combine things which are impossible to combine, and we have to think how it is possible. And sometimes this contradiction is resolved when we go onto another level of analysis. For example, this pleasantly ugly face means that the face is not very beautiful, but the person is so nice that he or she is pleasant to look at, right? Pleasantly ugly face, and the person loves it. That's why it is pleasant. But it's objectively, it's not that ideal, right? Or, for example, the best enemy. It sometimes happens, right? That people have enemies, but some of them are better than others. And then you can have the best enemy. Next comes a very famous oxymoron from Shakespeare. It is all the description of love. Oh, loving hate. Oh, heavy lightness. Feather of lead, свинцовое перо. Bright smoke. Cold fire. Sick health. And these all oxymorons help us to think about the essence of love, which in a way is sick health, right? It's health because we enjoy it. It is energy. It gives us energy, right? We're full of love for the beloved one, but it may be sick when the person, especially when somebody is jealous, right? It's sort of, or when somebody is afraid to lose the beloved one, sick health. It combines both things. Iced fire of your kiss from Carol and Duffy. Also a very bright, vivid one. It has the poorest millionaires, the littlest great men, the haughtiest beggars, надменные попрошайки, the plainest beauties, the lowest skyscrapers of any town I ever saw. About New York. Again, to show the contradictory nature of New York. Do you remember from the Soviet film, Стамбул, город контрастов, right? So the same thing. Something which contains contrasts. Now, some visual oxymorons. I wanted to remind you again that stylistic devices exist in all spheres of art, and sometimes they just arise out of circumstances of our life. We just have to notice them. Visual art. So these are visual oxymorons. Right? You see two uncombinable things. We don't know how to uncombine them. The attribute and the name, or the two uncombinable attributes. Any questions about oxymoron? No. We pass on to paradox. Paradox is a contradiction which exists on the level of a sentence. It's a seemingly absurd or contradictory statement that in fact contains a deep idea. Seemingly absurd or contradictory statement that in fact contains a deep and sound idea. So it is a contradiction which is resolved when we pass on to a higher level of analysis. Comes from a Greek word, paradoxos. Again, para is a prefix meaning beyond, out and beyond, around. And doxos is understanding, thinking. It's beyond understanding, beyond thinking, literally. Unfortunately, I have no time to dwell on this stylistic device and generally this phenomenon of art. It is very beautiful. It's very beautiful, very interesting. It is exciting to explore, but we are limited in time, so I'll just give you classical paradoxes. Well, as the word itself, paradox, was noticed in ancient Greece, and there are paradoxes which go back to ancient Greece. This one is an old paradox. This statement is false. Try to think why this is a paradox. Because if it is false, then it is true. But if it is true, it contradicts what it says. This statement is false. So there is this paradox inside the sentence itself. Or for example, less is more. How do you understand it? Less is more. Yes. If you have less something, then you have more value, more context. Well, yeah, in a way, this is the philosophy of which trend in art? Minimalism, right? The fewer things you have in the less furniture you have in your flat, the more space you have, right? Or maybe the more comfort. Well, it already depends on how you feel it, right? It can be applied to many other things, right? The fewer things you possess, the freer you are. So this is a very deep paradox, in fact. Well, Socrates. Now, if we go in time, then Socrates, I only know that I know nothing. That's a paradox, right? But it actually contains a very deep idea. The more you know, the more you understand how little you know. That's the paradox. And true knowledge is always connected with the realization how limited our power of cognition is. That's a paradox. But that's the same paradox, as when you go up some mountain. If you look from this window, you will only see the building opposite us, the hotel. If you go up on the upper floor of this building, on the roof of this building, you will see more of Moscow. If you go up on the Ostankino Tower, you will see even more, right? But at the same time, you will see how much is left outside your view, right? You will see that if you go up and up, the more you see, the more is the line of the horizon, right? Now, Thomas Carlyle, the greatest of all faults is to be conscious of none. Самый большой недостаток – это не осознавать в себе никаких недостатков. One more from the sphere of art, which I like very much, by Paul Gauguin. I shut my eyes in order to see, right? Which is a paradox. How can you see if you shut your eyes? But of course, he speaks of the inner world of the imagination, which works more, which works stronger, better if you close your eyes to the outer impressions. And the famous one by Oscar Wilde, the master of paradox. If you want to look at paradoxes, you can look at his works. Don't use big words, they mean so little, right? This is a criticism of those people who use big words about big things, but actually don't mean them. So people who like to use big words very often don't follow what they are speaking about. Now, visual paradoxes. Here are a couple of visual paradoxes. Well, on the left we have this shape, this figure, where we can't understand how it sort of how it is arranged and what kind of figure it is. On this, in the second picture, we see this optical illusion of an eternal staircase. It looks as if you go up and down the staircase all the time, right? It always goes up and up and up. See? See, this is a visual illusion. So this is a paradox on the visual level in painting, in drawing. There may be photographs, now we say memes, right, which act as paradoxes. This is a staircase which leads to nowhere. But at the same time, it is a seemingly absurd picture because it makes us think of the transience of things. It makes us think about the eternal value of things, right? Or where the staircases can lead us to. This is a visual paradox that I think is also very useful. It's used in social media, in social advertising. Smoking causes blindness. And so where is the paradox? Is that you put out the stump on your eye, right? But at the same time, this is, it is social media which is against smoking, but it is sort of the ashtray, the rubbish bin, which is for stumps, right? But this is a paradox. Again, this is resolved. Of course, the makers of this social ad want you to think that when you smoke, you literally spoil your eyes. You put out the cigarette and at the same time think that you are spoiling your eyes. Any questions about paradox? The beyond understanding thing. Oh, yes, one more example. I think this room should be made into one. Free no Wi-Fi zone. Right, this is a paradox because usually we are used to free Wi-Fi, but this is this was an initiative by people who hate it when people come together in a cafe and they, instead of talking to each other, instead of communicating, they're stuck in the smartphones. Or as I read in one blogger's article, погружай свой хоботок сразу в свой телефон, like a bee or a fly. So visual paradoxes. Now, figures of quantity. Figures of quantity. We're done with the figures of contradiction and opposition. Now, figures of quantity. Here we're going to speak of hyperbole, meiosis, and litotis. Hyperbole, from a Greek word hyperbole or hyperbole, hyperbole. Literally from, so volley or bole means to throw, and hyper is above. So throwing something above, throwing something up too much. It's a stylistic device in which emphasis is achieved through deliberate, disproportionate, намеренный, непропорциональный, exaggeration, преувеличение, and intensification of quantity or quality. The key word is deliberate and disproportionate. Usually hyperbole is an exaggeration which can't be true. And which quantity or quality can be exaggerated or intensified? Size, weight, speed, temperature, strength. So usually it's about things which can be measured. So using this visual scheme, we say something strong about something that is strong to make it look even stronger, because later on we'll have a slightly different scheme. For example, there are tried lexical stereotypes, hyperboles, 1,000 pardons. Well, if we think about it, we couldn't say 1,000 times, pardon me. 40, I told you a million times, I told you 40 times not to do this. Really, we haven't said it a million times. We couldn't. Frightened to death. Usually people are not, right? People don't die when they're frightened, usually. But this phrase is often said, frightened to death. So this is an unbelievable, too strong comparison. Not comparison, but exaggeration. I've been waiting for ages, right? Not for ages, literally. But some hyperboles are more genuine, they're fresher. A writing desk the size of a tennis court. Can you imagine one? He was so tall, I was not sure he had a face. Too tall. We'd like to see you here in the office right away or sooner. How can you be sooner than right away? Questions? Sarah's laughter could bring the entire building crashing. This is not possible, right? But we can imagine how loudly she laughed. Give me a conder's quill. Quill – пище перо. Перо, которым пишут. Дайте мне перо кондора. Give me Vesuvius crater for an inkstand. Кратер Везувия в качестве чернильницы. Right? The person is probably wants to speak about very great things. Then sometimes hyperbole can be joined with metaphor. Look at this. Then in a silence you could lean on, he went down the steps. Потом дальше в тишине, на которую можно было опереться. So it was so strong as if it was solidified. The voice could have peeled rust off the keel of the ship. Этот голос этим голосом можно было сдирать ржавчину с киля корабля. So it was so hard, right? This is metaphor and hyperbole. New York steak. Everybody knows it is in Detroit, not New York, the tires are manufactured. Нью-Йоркский стейк. Но все же знают, что шины делаются в Детройте, а не в Нью-Йорке. So this steak was so hard that it was as hard as a tire. It's metaphor and hyperbole. Now, a second subtype of hyperbole is when we use a small word about something small to look at even smaller. When we sort of exaggerate the smallness of something. So it's not only when we say something big about something big to make it look bigger. When we say something small about something small to make it look smaller. She was a sparrow of a woman. Она была воробушком таким. She wasn't literally as small as a sparrow. No one can be as small as this. So a sparrow is small and the resulting meaning is small. What is this? A school for ants, right? As if it is so miniature and small as if it is for ants. Yeah. Litotis. Yes, and you have to differentiate to tell apart what is hyperbole, what is litotis. This is hyperbole. You will see what litotis is. This is hyperbole. Thank you for the question. This is a frequent mistake of mistaking this thing for a litotis. We're going to come to litotis very soon. She sang listlessly as if she were bored with the whole thing, and the applause she collected could have been packed into a thimble without overflowing. Она пела бездушно, да, равнодушно, и все аплодисменты, которые она собрала, можно было собрать в наперсток, и он бы не переливался. So, a thimble is small, the applause was small, and of course this is impossible, right? It is too small. So in a way, this is exaggeration of smallness. Now, hyperbole is used in fiction for vividness, or expressed for emotion, for rendering emotions, for humor, and emotional intensification. The key word is intensification. It's also used in advertising, again, to strike your imagination, to promote your product. Guinness for strength, and you see he's carrying it with one hand, such a long, big, huge rail. This is impossible. This is a visual hyperbole. Visual hyperbole. Now, if you have no more questions about hyperbole, we pass on to something which is, again, you would call litotis. It's not. Or rather, litotis is a subtype of this. The proper name was sort of one of the, another name for it is meiosis. Meiosis, mind the pronunciation. It comes from the Greek word meaning becoming smaller. Meiosis literally means уменьшение. Or understatement, we'll come to it. So it is the opposite of hyperbole. It's the stylistic device of weakening, reduction of the real characteristics of the object of speech. So the spat of a woman, is she small? Yes. Right? And we say she's small, she's too tiny. But if something is big and we say it is small, meaning that, implying that the people will understand that this is big, this is meiosis, right? When you deliberately make something look smaller. What for? What for? For various things. One of the purposes to use meiosis is to do it in an indirect way again, to tickle your linguistic feeling, right? To get this intellectual pleasure from expressing your thoughts and making other people decode what you say. It will cost you a pretty penny. Penny, is it big money or small? Or big money or small money? Small. But a pretty penny, is it a big sum or a small one? Big, yes. Обойдется в копеечку. That's right, влетит в копеечку. Копеечку is small, but it means that you will spend a lot of money. So you see the sign, the plus and minuses are different. In hyperbole, it is plus, plus is two pluses. Here it is plus, minus and plus means two pluses, right? Across the pond, that's how the British often refer to the Atlantic. Our cousins across the pond, across the Atlantic. Well, this is usually said when people discuss the special relationship between the UK and the United States. And this is a woman greeting a friend of hers who has arrived from a distant province in New York. And she said, and what did you think of our little town? Как вам наш городишко? Right? We've got a few lights on Broadway, don't you think, Mr. Platt? Ну, у нас есть там парочка огней на Бродвее, не так ли? So this is linguistic play, right? This is word play. But at the same time, this can express irony, right? This meiosis, it can be coupled with irony. It can render and convey your attitude to people when you don't take them seriously, and it can also convey your strength and bravery and endurance. Like this example from Shakespeare, Mercutio is mortally wounded by a sword. His friend asks him, "What, are you hurt?" Yes, yes, a scratch, a scratch. Ну так, царапина, царапина. Right? He is trying to show spirit. It can also be used in euphemisms and understatement, meiosis, very often at the heart of euphemism, right? After the Civil War in the United States at the end of the 19th century, the newspapers started to refer to it sometimes jokingly as the recent unpleasantness. Yeah. I hope that all wars end like this. I mean, that they end and people later refer to them in recent unpleasantnesses. Now, understatement is also has a cultural significance in British culture, because understatement is a strategy, a verbal strategy, which is often associated with the British. Why? The British like to emphasize that they like not to puff up, not to show that they are proud, right? They like to show that they are modest. This is a good feature, by the way. It's not always that sincere, but that's a good feature, to show that you are not trying to show off, right? The desire not to show off is this understatement that leads to understatement. And one more thing is the stiff upper lip of the Brits, right? When they preserve their cool, preserve the self-possession, right? They're self-possessed in situations of crisis. Of course, this is not only about the British, but this is something which is a stereotype or self-stereotype about the Brits. And learners of English must, of course, learn the art of understatement. It's an art to master. It was rather a serious evening, you know. Sir Gordon describing his survival of the sinking of the Titanic, right? Of course. And again, that was big. The sinking of the Titanic was big. It was rather a serious evening. Doesn't sound that big, right? But we understand it was big, and we understand that the person is sort of, he was not very emotional, so he was quite self-possessed. This one. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We have a small problem. All 4 engines have stopped. We're doing our best to get them going again. I trust you are not in too much distress. Very British, very British. And this is understatement again, the understating of the real problem. Now we have come to Litotis. Litotis is a subtype of meiosis. And it's expressing an idea by means of negating the opposite one, And again, the purpose is that with 2 minuses, you get a plus. So you want to show that something indirectly, like periphrasis, you probably recognize that we are speaking of many things which echo each other, right? Well, that's a hyperbole. If we think, well, there may be different schools of stylistics, but дюймовочка и мальчик с пальчик, it follows the same pattern as hyperbole. Well, look at this. This is Litotis, not without his assistance. So we negate the greatness of something, and this way we make it great. Unillegal. It's illegal, so it's legal. We negate the negative characteristic and so make it bigger. If we speak about мальчик с пальчик, we mean that we say пальчик is small and the boy is also small. So it follows the pattern of hyperbole, you see, not Litotis. We don't, if we said, for example, мальчик с пальчик, but we meant a big man, look, this is a good example. If you have a giant and you say, ну этот мальчик с пальчик вряд ли справится. This is Litotis, this is meiosis, right? No coward, he was not averse to drinking, не прочь был выпить. Or for example, this from Homer, I think, neither unthinking nor unseeing means that he could think, he realized it, and he saw. Any questions? Now, wordplay. We have very little time for wordplay, and only so much that we can do in these 9 minutes. There will be several stylistic devices subsumed under this name. I hope we managed to cover the pun, kalambur, the play on words, their meaning, form, and combination for amusement, humor, or better memorizing. The pun. We'll deal with pun, zeugma, and several others. There are lots of types of wordplay, and we are not going to take them all. Pun is the one that you are most familiar with. Play on words based on polysemy or homonymy when 2 meanings are activated simultaneously within a close context, causing a humorous effect by unexpectedness or incongruity. Which stylistic devices that we have covered today is pun related to? Irony, because of the word incongruity, right? We came across it in the definition of irony. And with oxymoron, yes, and with periphrasis, right? Because we use more words, often more words than is necessary. So pun is used in jokes, in riddles. Well, these are, you remember the jokes from the textbook on lexicology textbook by Olga Vasilina. In riddles, загадках, and very often in newspaper headings. Newspaper article authors, they love punning. This is I'll begin with the classical puns from Lewis Carroll. Do you remember when Alice in Wonderland goes to see Griffin and Mock Turtle, Quasi-Черепаху и Грифона? And they start to tell her about their education, about their school. And Mock Turtle says, we called him, our teacher, taught us, because he taught us, right? And this is a good example of a pun based on homonyms, right? Homonyms, in this case, homophones. Taught us and tortoise, черепаха are homophones. And how many hours a day did you do lessons, said Alice. 10 hours the first day, said the Mock Turtle, 9 the next, and so on. What a curious plan, exclaimed Alice. That's the reason they are called lessons, the Griffin remarked, because they lesson from day to day. I'm sure that students would love such a lesson plan. This man kisses, misses, that one misses, kisses, right? Also homonyms and homophones. How does the ocean say hi? It waves, right? And the two words, right? Waves as a noun of water and wave as a motion, as a movement. Homonyms, homonym puns in newspaper headlines. Kidnapper, device for sending babies to sleep. Where is the pun? Kidnap, so the baby is kidnapped into sleep, right? There is metaphor here. So he is in the realm of sleep. But at the same time, nap means дремать, кимарить, right? So sending somebody to nap. Looking after your garden by dandelion. Dandelion means одуванчик, right? So a book looking after your garden by dandelion. I guess not a very good book. Those of you who like gardening know how difficult it is to get rid of dandelions. Now, homonyms in newspaper headings. This one is a brilliant example. It's not only pun, it's also an illusion. A tale of 5 squirrels. Vets untangle Gordian knot of rodents. Распутывают Гордиев узел грызунов. Wildlife Center operates to save animals' tails that became entwined with each other in their nest. Перекрутились хвостами, and so they got entwined. They got caught up with their tails, and they had to separate them. But where is the pun? Tail, рассказ, повесть, and tails as хвосты. But at the same time, there is an allusion to a famous book, A Tale of Two Cities. A Tale of Two Cities, повесть о двух городах. That's a famous novel, and that's an allusion to this. And breath of fresh air, right? When the heir to the throne was born, and the wait is finally over for Catherine, William, the royals, and the world. So the birth of the heir, and he gets a breath of fresh air when he gets out, and it's also a breath of fresh air for everybody because everybody was expecting him, right? So that's a very nice pun. Now, pun can be based on polysemy, so not homonymous words, but the words with the same one word and different meanings can be activated. Why did the teddy bear say no to dessert? Because he was stuffed. Stuffed means full, not wanting to eat, and at the same time filled with this soft stuff as soft toys are. Gravitation is not responsible for people falling in love, right? And the pun is in the words gravitation, so falling. And falling in love, where falling has a figurative sense, a different meaning of the word falling. I'm reading a book about anti-gravity. I can't put it down, right? So literally put down, and then it is related to gravitation. And at the same time, so interesting that it's unputdownable. I was wondering why the baseball was getting bigger. Then it hit me. right? Hit me as it struck me, I understood the figurative meaning and hit directly, well, which is baseball about. The road to success is always under construction. So the plain meanings, road as in the direct meaning, right? It's the way, the road, the asphalt, and secondly, the figurative road. The best, and then pun can be based on decomposition of words, phrases, and idioms. So when you decompose and make parts of these words alive, when you resurrect their old meaning. The best kind of giving is thanksgiving, right? Red tape holds up new bridge. That's a brilliant pun. That's a headline. Red tape holds up new bridge. What is red tape? Волокита, right? Бюрократия. Holds up, задерживает. So the red tape holds up, delays the construction of a new bridge. But at the same time, tape here is as скотч. Красный скотч поддерживает новый мост, right? So the play on words. And this one is a decomposition of a set phrase. You know which side the law is buttered. Знаете, с какой стороны намазан бутерброд. And here we, instead of the bread, we insert law. You know which side the law is buttered. Do you have more classes now? Yes, it's a pity because I haven't managed to read this one. Okay, then we'll stop here and then I'll have to maybe record it myself because there is no point in actually continuing next time. At least I'll read the pun and then finally we'll speak about Zugma. Oh, that's so illogical to end it now. So look, those of you who need to go. I'll read it because this is being recorded. And I'll finish this and then the full version will be on the net. So those of you who need to go, but very silently. So the final type of puns is based on paronymy. Paronyms are words which sound similar, close to each other, but not identical. They are not full homonyms or homophones. And the good example is this: new roads, new ruts, новые дороги, новые колеи. And the fun here is that new roads implies that there will be new ways and new opportunities. And ruts means that everything will stay the same, in the same rut. And road and rut are paronyms, right? They look and sound similar, so they make us remember about each other. But at the same time, they mean different things and they sound differently. And the continuation of puns from Alice in Wonderland, well, there was mystery, the Mock Turtle replied. And here he continues to speak about the subjects they had at school. And by mystery, guess what they had? Mystery, ancient and modern with geography. History, of course. History, mystery, paronyms. Then drawling. Drawling means растягивать слова. But he means drawing, right? Of course, also paronyms. And the drawling master was an old eel, старый угорь, that used to come once a week. He taught us drawing, stretching, подтягивание, but he means etching, гравировка, гравюры, and fainting in coils, падание в обморок рулонами. But he refers, of course, to fainting in oils, right, yes. Again, these are paronyms. Now, again, paronyms-based puns in headlines. From Russia with gloves, right? Siberian weather to heat UK. Big chill could last for weeks. So this is an allusion to the famous phrase from Russia with love, and gloves is the paronym to love. And also beloved, puns with paronyms, beloved in advertisements. Unicorn, a single corn. So good corn, кукуруза, is called unicorn, единорог. But at the same time, that's decomposition, right, of corn and uni, decomposition of as a complex word. Exciting, egg sounds right, X, right? New York City Easter activities, exciting, looking for eggs. Beware of pickpockets, right? Pickpockets, and somebody who could take French fries from your packet. And this one, these are, they may be considered as irony as well. But in this case, these are puns based on homonyms, right? Unintended puns. So this is a good example of puns which are not intended. This is a cafe, Japanese cafe, Yaki's Japanese steak. Well, we remember this is a usual part of the word in Japanese names, teriyaki and things like that. But in English, of course, that doesn't sound good. Yaki's Japanese steak. Or cafe arsenic, I think it is in Hungary. What does arsenic mean? Mushyak, that's poison, right? Which again, there's an unintended pun. It's very funny for English speakers. Here we end. We'll look at Zeugma either in a separate lecture, which I will record myself, or next time. Thank you very much. На этом можно закончить запись. Спасибо. Всем напоминаю еще раз, что на первой же лекции 13 ноября мы с вами